The camera flashes went off like lightning across the garden. Amara's hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet, white roses mixed with orchids, their fragrance doing nothing to calm the storm building in her chest. The aisle stretched before her like a test she wasn't sure she'd pass. "Keep smiling," her aunt whispered beside her. "Everyone's watching." That was the problem. Everyone was watching. 300 guests filled the garden venue, their phones raised, recording every second of what should have been the happiest day of her life. The DJ played the processional music at full volume, but beneath it, Amara could hear the whispers starting. Something was wrong. Her groom, David, stood at the altar with his back rigid, his face turned slightly away. His mother leaned in close to him, her lips moving rapidly. David's best man shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the bride approaching and the groom who wouldn't look up. Amara forced her feet to keep moving. One step, another. The silk of her dress caught the afternoon sun, making her look radiant even as dread coiled in her stomach. She'd known David for 3 years. They'd planned this day for 8 months. His family had approved everything, chosen the venue, invited half the guests themselves. So why did his mother look furious? The music swelled as Amara reached the altar. David finally turned to face her, and her breath caught. His eyes were red, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. He looked like a man about to break. "David?" she whispered. The pastor cleared his throat, raising his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." "Wait." David's voice cut through the ceremony like a blade. The garden went silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. "I can't do this." David's words came out strangled, barely audible. But in the dead silence they might as well have been shouted. "I'm sorry, Amara." "I can't." The first gasp rippled through the crowd. Then another. Then the whispers exploded like a dam breaking. Amara stood frozen, the bouquet suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds in her hands. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't marry you." David's voice grew stronger now, as if saying it once had given him permission to destroy her completely. "I was pressured into this. My family, your family, everyone pushing and pushing. But I'm not ready. I don't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I don't think this is right." Amara's aunt gasped behind her. Someone in the crowd let out a nervous laugh that died immediately. Phones that had been recording a wedding were now capturing a public execution. "You don't think this is right?" Amara repeated slowly. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. Inside, she was shattering into 1,000 pieces, but her voice came out steady and clear. "You proposed to me, David. You chose this venue. You invited these people. And now, standing here, you tell me you were pressured." David's mother stepped forward. "Amara, don't make a scene. These things happen. It's better he's honest now than later." "A scene?" Amara turned to look at the woman who would never be her mother-in-law. "I'm not making a scene. I'm standing here at the altar where your son brought me, in a dress I bought for the wedding he planned, in front of 300 people he invited. If there's a scene being made, I'm not the one making it." The sharpness in her tone cut through the shock. A few people in the crowd actually nodded, but most just stared, their phones still recording, hungry for drama. Amara looked back at David. Really looked at him. This man she'd imagined building a life with. She'd pictured children with his smile, lazy Sunday mornings, growing old together. And he was throwing it all away because he wasn't ready? After 3 years? After getting down on one knee in front of her entire family? "Is this your final answer?" she asked quietly. David's jaw worked. His mother's hand tightened on his arm. He looked at Amara with something that might have been guilt or might have been relief, and he nodded. Yes. The word landed like a stone in still water. Final. Complete. Amara felt the weight of 300 stares. Felt the phones recording her humiliation. Knew that by tonight this would be all over social media. The rejected bride. The woman who wasn't enough to make a man follow through on his promises. She could beg. She could cry. She could collapse right there and let them have their show. Instead, she turned slowly, taking in the crowd of guests who'd come to celebrate and stayed to witness her destruction. Her bridesmaids stood frozen, their matching gold dresses suddenly looking ridiculous. David's groomsmen avoided eye contact. The pastor clutched his Bible like a shield. And in the back, seated alone in the last row, a man watched with eyes like dark water. Amara hadn't noticed him during the ceremony preparations, hadn't seen him arrive. But now, as her gaze swept across the stunned faces, she caught his stare and held it for just a moment. He didn't look away, didn't even blink. He sat perfectly still in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the entire wedding. His hands folded, his expression unreadable. Something about his stillness steadied her. Amara straightened her spine, adjusted the bouquet in her hands, and walked back down the aisle. Not running, not crying. Walking with her head high, her shoulders back, her eyes fixed on the exit. The whispers followed her like smoke. Can you believe that? Poor thing. I knew something was off about them. Did you see her face? Is anyone getting this? Amara made it past the rows of guests, past the decorated archway, past the reception tent with its empty tables set for a celebration that would never happen. She made it all the way to the parking lot before her knees finally gave out. She caught herself on a car bumper, the white roses scattering across the pavement. Her breath came in sharp gasps now, the adrenaline wearing off, the reality crashing in. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. In front of everyone. You handled that better than most would. Amara spun around. The man from the back row stood 10 feet away, his hands in his pockets, his expression still neutral. Up close, she could see he was Korean, probably in his late 30s, with a scar that traced from his right eyebrow to his temple. His eyes were the darkest she'd ever seen. Who are you? Her voice came out harsher than she intended. Someone who knew your father. He took a step closer, and Amara noticed the way he moved, predatory and precise, like a man used to violence. Dr. Michael Okafor. He saved my life once, in a clinic outside Enugu. I was badly injured. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand payment. Just saved me. Amara's throat tightened. Her father had died 2 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and brutal. She still missed him every day. I don't know you, she said. No. But I know you. And I know what just happened in there was not your fault. The man's gaze flicked back toward the garden where the murmurs were growing louder. That man is a coward. His family are bullies. And you deserved better than that humiliation. Well, I didn't get it. Amara bent down to gather the scattered roses, her hands shaking now. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry you wasted your time. It wasn't a waste. Something in his tone made her look up. The man was watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but instead felt oddly grounding. Like he was seeing something in her that she couldn't see herself. My name is Kang Joon-tae, he said slowly, as if the name should mean something. Didn't. Amara shook her head. I'm sorry, I run business operations across 3 continents. I came here today because I owed your father a debt I can never repay. I planned to pay my respects and leave. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. But watching what just happened changed my perspective. Changed it how? Instead of answering, Joon-tae turned and walked back toward the garden. Confused, Amara followed, her dress catching on the gravel. By the time she reached the garden entrance, she could hear David's voice raised in frustration. Just call it off. Cancel everything. Everyone can go home. You humiliated her. Someone shouted from the crowd. One of Amara's cousins. You humiliated our entire family. I made a mistake. David's voice cracked. People make mistakes. Not like this. David's best man muttered, loud enough to carry. Joon-tae walked through the chaos like Moses parting the Red Sea. People instinctively moved out of his way, sensing something dangerous in his calm. He walked straight to the altar where David still stood, now arguing with the pastor about whether he needed to pay for the full ceremony anyway. Excuse me. Joon-tae's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through every other sound like a knife through silk. The entire garden went silent again, 300 people turning to stare at the stranger who'd appeared from nowhere. David looked at him with confusion and irritation. Who are you? This is a private. You're right that you made a mistake, Joon-tae interrupted. His English was perfect but carried an accent that made every word sound deliberate. But your mistake wasn't agreeing to this wedding. Your mistake was believing you were worthy of it. David's face flushed red. You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't even know us. I know enough. Joon-tae's gaze swept across David, his family, the gathered crowd. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the garden. I know that woman walked away from this altar with more dignity than you will ever possess. I know she deserved better than your cowardice. And I know that if you are too weak to honor your commitment. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then someone else should. What are you suggesting? The pastor looked bewildered. Joon-tae turned, his eyes finding Amara where she stood at the garden entrance. She felt pinned in place by that stare, felt the attention of 300 people shifting to her like a tidal wave. I'm suggesting, Joon-tae said slowly, that if he will not marry her, then I will. The garden exploded. Gasps and shouts overlapped. David's mother shrieked something unintelligible. The bridesmaids grabbed each other. Phones raised higher, making sure to capture this impossible moment. Amara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. Joon-tae walked toward her through the chaos, his steps measured, his expression unchanged. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that only she could hear his next words. You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. But I give you my word that if you agree to this, you will be respected. You will be protected. And you will never have to face that kind of humiliation again. His dark eyes searched hers. The choice is yours. Why? Amara's voice came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do this? Because a woman who can stand alone in front of 300 people and walk away with her head high deserves to be honored, not abandoned. Joon-tae extended his hand. And because I owe your father a debt, this is how I pay it. Amara looked at his outstretched hand, looked back at the chaos behind them, at David arguing with his mother, at the guests recording every second on their phones, at the wedding that was supposed to be her happy ending but had become her worst nightmare. She thought about going home alone, thought about the pitying looks she'd get for months, maybe years, thought about being known forever as the woman who wasn't enough to make her groom say I do. Then she looked at the stranger who'd appeared from nowhere with eyes like steel, and an offer that made no sense but somehow felt like the only thing that did. I don't even know you, she said. You will. Amara took his hand. The chaos doubled. David pushed forward through the crowd, suddenly animated in a way he hadn't been 10 minutes ago. Wait, you can't just… Amara, this is insane. You don't know this man. He could be anyone. Joon-tae didn't even look at him. The ceremony was already paid for. The guests are already here. All that's needed is a willing groom. Now he did turn, pinning David with a stare that made the younger man take an involuntary step back. Unless you've changed your mind? David's mouth opened and closed. His mother grabbed his arm, whispering furiously, but he couldn't seem to form words. Whatever he saw in Joon-tae's face had stolen his voice. Then it settled. Joon-tae turned to the pastor, who looked like he might faint. Can you proceed? This is highly irregular. I need to check the marriage license. The license has the bride's information. We'll handle the administrative details afterward. Joon-tae pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and within seconds a man in a black suit appeared from the parking lot carrying a leather folder. Joon-tae handed it to the pastor. My identification, all legally documented. I'm a citizen with proper visa status. Everything you need is there. The pastor opened the folder with shaking hands, scanned the documents, and looked up with wide eyes. Whatever he'd seen had changed his expression from confusion to something closer to fear. This is… Yes, everything appears to be in order. He cleared his throat. But the bride would need to consent. Amara. Joon-tae turned back to her, and his voice softened just slightly. You can still walk away. No one will stop you. But if you want to turn this day into something other than his victory, he tilted his head toward David, then say yes. Every eye in the garden was on her. Every phone recording. This would spread across social media within the hour, across news sites by tomorrow. Rejected bride marries stranger at the altar. It was impossible. Insane. The kind of thing that only happened in movies. But then again, getting publicly rejected at your own wedding was also the kind of thing that only happened in movies, and she just lived through that. Yes, Amara said clearly. I'll marry you. If the garden had exploded before, now it went supernova. David lunged forward, but Joon-tae's assistant appeared from nowhere. A wall of muscle in a black suit that didn't move but didn't need to. David froze. Joon-tae led Amara to the altar. The bridesmaids scrambled to follow, looking dazed. The pastor flipped through his ceremony notes with trembling fingers. Amara's aunt appeared at her side, gripping her arm. Amara, what are you doing? You don't know this man. I didn't really know David either, Amara heard herself say. Clearly, the pastor cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. He paused, laughed nervously. Well, I suppose we're still gathered for the same reason, just with a different groom. A few uncertain laughs rippled through the crowd. Joon-tae stood perfectly still beside Amara, his presence somehow calming despite the insanity of the situation. He didn't smile, didn't fidget, just stood there like this was exactly what he'd planned all along. The ceremony blurred past in a haze. Amara heard herself saying vows she'd memorized for David. Heard Joon-tae repeat them in his accented English, his voice steady and sure. When the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," Joon-tae leaned in close enough that his next words reached only her ears. "We don't need to. Not if you're not comfortable." But Amara found herself reaching up, pulling him down, pressing her lips to his in front of 300 witnesses and countless recording phones. Not because she felt anything romantic, but because she needed everyone watching to know this was real. This was happening. She wasn't the rejected bride anymore. She was the woman who'd turned her humiliation into power. When they pulled apart, the garden erupted in confused applause. Some people cheered. Others looked horrified. David was being physically restrained by his best man while his mother shouted something about lawsuits. Joon-tae took Amara's hand and led her back down the aisle. This time, when she walked past the rows of guests, their expressions weren't pitying. They were shocked, amazed. Some looked impressed. A black Mercedes waited at the garden entrance, its engine already running. Joon-tae opened the door for Amara, and she climbed in, her wedding dress spilling across the leather seats. He slid in beside her and the car pulled away smoothly, leaving the chaos behind. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amara stared out the window at the city passing by, her mind blank with shock. What had she just done? She'd married a complete stranger. A man she'd exchanged maybe 20 sentences with. A man whose last name she could barely remember how to pronounce. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "My hotel for tonight. Tomorrow we fly to Seoul." "Seoul, South Korea." "Yes. I don't have clothes. I don't have my passport. I don't have anything except this dress. Everything will be arranged." Joon-tae's voice was calm, matter of fact. "My people will collect what you need from your home. Your passport will be expedited. Within 48 hours, everything will be ready." "Your people." Amara turned to look at him properly for the first time since getting in the car. "What exactly do you do, Kang Joon-tae? What kind of business runs operations across 3 continents?" His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said simply, "The kind your father was smart enough not to ask questions about when he saved my life." A chill ran down Amara's spine. "Are you telling me I just married a criminal? I'm telling you that you married a man who keeps his promises. What I do to keep those promises is complicated." He paused. "And yes, often illegal. Does that terrify you?" It should have. Amara knew it should have. But sitting there in her wedding dress, having just been publicly humiliated by a man she trusted, then saved by a stranger with dangerous eyes, she found that terror had been replaced by something else. something reckless. Should I be terrified? She asked. Of me? No, never. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Of my world? Perhaps. But I meant what I said. You will be protected. Always. The car pulled up to a hotel that made Amara's apartment building look like a garden shed. The doorman opened her door, carefully helping her navigate her dress. More men in black suits appeared, forming a protective circle that moved them through the lobby and into a private elevator. This is insane, Amara whispered. Yes, Joon-tae agreed. But you chose it anyway. They rode the elevator to the top floor. The penthouse suite had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Amara walked to the glass, her reflection ghostly in the growing darkness. Below, the city lights spread out like stars. What happens now? She asked. Now we get the marriage legally documented. Then we handle the media because this will spread fast. Then we give you time to think, to decide if you want to continue with this or if you'd prefer an annulment. Amara turned to face him. An annulment? You married me under extreme circumstances. If you wake up tomorrow and realize you made a mistake, I'll understand. We can undo this quietly. After that public ceremony? After every phone in that garden recorded us? There's no undoing this quietly. There is if I arrange it. Joon-tae shrugged off his suit jacket, revealing a holster with a gun that he removed and set casually on the table. Amara's breath caught. I have resources you can't imagine. If you want out, you'll be out. No questions asked. And if I don't want out? Then your life changes completely. Tonight. They stared at each other across the luxury suite. This stranger who'd become her husband and this woman who'd become his wife, both knowing they'd stepped into something neither fully understood. I need to understand something, Amara said slowly. You said you owed my father a debt. But this marriage, this is beyond debt. This is more than I needed to do, Joon-tae finished. You're right. I could have paid my respects and left. Could have sent you money to help you rebuild. Could have done many things that would have honored your father's memory without tying my life to yours. Then why? He moved closer, stopping a few feet away, close enough that she could see the scar on his face clearly, see the hardness in his eyes that came from seeing too much violence, living too much darkness. Because when you stood at that altar, when that coward rejected you, you didn't break. You didn't beg. You walked away like a queen leaving behind something beneath her. His voice dropped lower. I've spent 20 years in a world where weakness means death, where showing emotion gets you killed. And I watched you show more strength in silence than most of my men show with guns. That's not common. That's not something you find every day. So you married me because I didn't cry? I married you because you reminded me that strength comes in forms I'd forgotten to respect. He turned away, moving to the window. My world doesn't have much room for honor anymore. But your father showed it to me once. You showed it today. Maybe I'm trying to remember what that feels like. Amara absorbed his words, this confession from a man who clearly didn't confess often. She thought about David, about his weakness masquerading as honesty. Thought about the 3 years she'd spent building a life with someone who'd crumbled under the lightest pressure. I want to be clear about something, she said firmly. I'm grateful you stepped in. I'm grateful you gave me a way out of that humiliation. But I won't be your charity case. I won't be the poor African girl you saved who spends her life grateful and subservient. If we're doing this, really doing this, then I need respect. Not protection like I'm weak. Respect like I'm equal. For the first time since she'd met him, Joon-tae smiled. It was slight, barely there, but it transformed his face from intimidating to something almost human. I wouldn't have married you if I thought you were weak, he said. We have an agreement, Amara Okafor. Respect. Equal partnership. And if you find you can't live in my world, you walk away with no shame. Amara Kang now, she corrected, testing the name on her tongue. Felt foreign. Strange. But no stranger than anything else about this impossible day. Amara Kang, he repeated, then added, rest tonight. Tomorrow, everything changes. He was right. Amara could feel it in her bones. Tomorrow, Her life would transform in ways she couldn't yet imagine. She'd stepped out of one world and into another, leaving behind the woman who'd walked down that aisle expecting a normal future. Normal was over, and strangely, terrifyingly, she wasn't sure she wanted it back. Outside the windows, the city glittered with possibility and danger in equal measure, and Amara stood at the threshold of both, her hand resting against the glass, her wedding dress still perfect despite everything it had witnessed, her heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Behind her, Kang Joon-tae made a phone call in rapid Korean, his voice hard and commanding, every inch the powerful man he'd claimed to be. Amara listened to the foreign syllables and realized that this stranger, this criminal, this man with dark eyes and darker secrets, was now her husband. The woman who'd been rejected at the altar was gone. Someone new was being born, and she had a feeling the world would learn very soon not to underestimate her again. If you've made it this far into this impossible story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. Because trust me, this is only the beginning. The real story is about to get even more intense.